So in December of 2009, at one of my boot camps, one of the guys that showed up was a guy named Bill DeWeese. Bill was at the time making 140, $150,000 a year doing voice work. So when he showed up, I said, "Hey, it's kind of interesting that you have that background because at one point I really seriously thought about doing that." I said, rather than doing this on your own, how about we partner together? We generated well over $3 million producing and putting together what's now become the largest voiceover channel on YouTube.
Do you want to know the secret to success? Welcome to rulesforsuccess.com, a platform that unites the accomplished and the ambitious. We're here to arm you with the invaluable knowledge of individuals who have paved their own path to success. And now let's get into the show with dynamic host Joseph Varghese.
Joseph Varghese here. Welcome to Rules for Success, our podcast to make you better. We support entrepreneurs to become better each and every day. Rulesforsuccess.com. I am here with a good friend of mine, somebody I've known for 21 years at this point, perhaps a little longer. One of my first marketing mentors, entrepreneur, veteran info marketer, equity strategist who's helped coaches, consultants, and freelancers turn their skills into scalable, high leverage businesses. With over 16 years of experience, Fred Gleeck has had a portfolio of equity partnerships across multiple niches. He's a creator of the micro equity model, a system that replaces one-off client work with long-term profit shares. Fred has built one of the largest voiceover training platforms on YouTube, and now he teaches others how to grow without burning out or scaling teams. Now, I've known Fred for about 21 years now. He was one of the first marketers who I engaged with here in New York City. He no longer lives in New York City. He's trained some of the best. Back in 2017, when we connected years ago, we reconnected. I learned that Russell Brunson was also one of your students way back in the days.
I think so. I can't guarantee that, but I think he bought some of my material.
Got it. Yeah. Well, I know you've trained and you worked with some of the best over the years. And from my experience of you way back, you love training. You're one of the first who really saw the value in breaking down all aspects of marketing, online marketing. I remember so many lessons from those experiences way back. Things I can probably recite here because when I heard you speak, something in me ignited. I went from being an engineer to being an entrepreneur and starting one of my second company and not knowing how to market. And finally, when I attended your workshops, it was the Learning Addicts and then perhaps separate workshops afterwards. There was a roadmap and it all made sense and it all connected when it comes to sales, copywriting, branding, you name it. You covered all bases over the course of 1 to 2 hours. So I've known Fred for 21 years. He was my start into this world of online marketing. That's his background. Over the years, he's pivoted and he's gotten into equity. He's an equity strategist now. Fred, how are you today?
I'm good. I'm just sad that I wouldn't have partnered with you very early on. I would have been much better off.
I'm sure you've had a lot of partnerships over the years, right? I remember some of those early on in days. I think in one of the workshops I attended with you 21 years ago, it's another gentleman who was also passionate about improv. Improv helped me break out of the world of engineering and helped me be more in the moment, like we are now. And I know that gentleman built a brand with you. We talked about him a few days ago when we last connected. You've gone on to help several other people over the years build brands, like take their vision, take what they're doing in their niche and really expand that. And I even recall you doing workshops, bringing people to Vegas where you used to live before into your home, where you'd sit down for days kind of mapping out products together, their mission. That's extraordinary. Like, what brought you on this journey of being an internet marketer, an entrepreneur? And I want to hear about the early days too, growing up in the Philippines. I know about that part of your journey. I want to hear all of it. Our audience deserves to hear that too.
Sure. Let me give him a quick background. Thanks for having me, by the way. So I was born in Japan, raised in the Philippines because my dad was an American diplomat. And I ended up lucking out being born to somebody who was traveling all over the place. I was born in Japan, raised in Manila. And while in the Philippines, my passion at the time was to play golf. So I ended up becoming the best golfer as a junior in my age group, the 14 through 18 category, and won the national championship a couple times in a row in the Philippines, not realizing, of course, that my golf skills were great for a smaller country like the Philippines at the time, but didn't equate to me being able to shine people's shoes who played golf here in the United States. So I came over to the States and went to college and grad school, and quickly left my golf aspirations behind as I realized I wasn't in their league. But it was funny because while I was in grad school, I was studying international business, and I picked up a book called Put Your Money Where Your Mouth Is by a guy named Robert Anthony. And it talked about how you can make a career as a professional speaker. And having had kind of theatrical and performing interest, but my parents said to me one time, they said, if you want to study that in college, figure out a way to pay for it yourself. So I said, so what'll you pay for? And they said, well, we'll pay for anything all the way through a master's in business. So in order to keep myself in beer money through college and grad school, I studied business. But when I read that book in grad school, I said to myself, this is kind of an interesting way to combine my performing interest with my business background. So I ended up doing what I used to call business theater, which is doing kind of performance slash seminars slash workshops in a business milieu. So therefore, I was doing theater in terms of teaching and training, and some of which you came to. Yes. But what happened was I started to do a lot of speaking and promoting my own materials. I would sell products from the stage. People would buy them, and that was great. And inevitably, nobody did anything with it. They would buy stuff from me, and I'd be very disappointed with the fact there was very little implementation. So what happened was, as you spoke about, I started putting together these boot camps in Las Vegas. I did that for a number of years, and in December of 2009, a guy came to one of those boot camps. I'd have him at my house. People would stay there for a week, up to 6 people, paying anywhere between $3,000 and $5,000 each. We would teach them, feed them, do everything, help them for a full week, then send them out on their own. But
would they stay over your place? Would they stay over?
Yeah, no, we would put them up. I had a 4-bedroom place. They would bunk 2 to a room. I'd be in the master bedroom, and we'd have people 2 in each room, single beds, kind of like dorm style. And
by the way, I think it's awesome, especially being in proximity to you. When you're in proximity to somebody else, I believe in proximity. The whole basis for Success Circles, my ventures, is all based on proximity, where people connect, engage, kind of mastermind of sorts. Little side story is you got me deeply passionate about Broadway shows years ago. After one of your events, way back in the days, 20 years ago, we saw a Broadway show together. Just the experience of it was great. Right, it's called Dirty Rotten Scoundrels, I believe it was, and it had like some of the greats. Nathan Lane.
I'm trying to remember.
Nathan Lane and also another well-known actor.
I forget who it was.
Yeah, it was great, but you also instilled in me the value of embracing disconnect, like tapping into theater, enjoying it, and now that's an integral part of what we teach communities I lead about play, about disconnecting, about enjoying theater or shows or nature, all the things needed to be a creative, inspired entrepreneur.
Well, I'm glad I sparked that interest in you. I think it's absolutely right on that you're doing that, because people can't have great ideas without disconnecting. I think that's when they happen.
Yes, especially when you're in awe. Whatever creates awe for you. For me, I still watch Broadway shows once a week, and I get in nature, but we challenge our members in our community to do just that. So that spark came from way back, and I was listening very intently. I remember even you talking about how you drove a car and you were testing out some marketing strategies. You put out a banner in the back of the car and you tracked a number of links. And this is early in the days, like nobody was doing these things. So you're way early, and people are doing that now, like kind of tracking brands, and you were one of the first to kind of communicate the ease of that and the importance of that, the importance of having an autoresponder, and you're working with one of the top ones back then. Just good stuff.
I'm glad that I sparked that interest.
Yes. Well, back to you. So you're now doing micro equity that tapped into. Talk about the gentleman. You mentioned there was a certain gentleman who came to one of your events, and you're building a voiceover community on YouTube, your voiceover channel. So
Yes.
talk to us about that.
Sure. So in December of 2009, at one of my boot camps, one of the guys that showed up was a guy named Bill DeWeese. Bill was at the time making $140,000, $150,000 a year doing voice work. And it was funny because back in New York, where I lived for 20 years, I had back in 1985 put together a voiceover tape hoping to try and get myself voice work. I produced 300 cassette tapes at the time. 298 still remain in my storage unit someplace. So I didn't do much with it, but I'd already been thinking about it. So when he showed up, I said, hey, it's kind of interesting that you have that background, because at one point I really seriously thought about doing that. So when he was about to end his time with me for the week in Vegas, I said, rather than doing this on your own, how about we partner together? I'd spent enough time with him to know that we had a little bit of a connection, that we could probably work together well. And so I suggested what then became my first equity deal. At the time, it was micro equity. It grew into something a little bit bigger than micro, because it got to be, we generated, over the time I was with Bill, well over $3 million producing and putting together what's now become the largest voiceover channel on YouTube for voiceover artists, which is the first thing that I told him to do as he was leaving that event. Is you got to start a YouTube channel, you got to start putting videos in there. And I think to date we have probably 1,500 videos in that YouTube channel. We call it the voiceover blueprint. And so that's where it all started. And we built a fairly substantial business. And that business, started by Bill, has now been taken over by one of our best students, Mike Hathcote. And so that's where we stand with that right now.
Incredible. So it's basically passive income for you. It's a partnership that's there, and you inspired the idea, and you, of course, created the deal around that. And like, how does one do that? So I know you're going to talk about the process. You have a training program for that specifically. I'd love to hear how one does that.
Yeah, and I hope that Mike, if he's watching, doesn't think this is completely passive income. I have to do less now than I used to, but I still contribute quite a bit because I have a vested interest in the success of this venture. And we have Mike, another partner, Chris, who's involved in doing all this funnel building and copywriting. Mike is now the face of the organization. He's in fact a voiceover artist and makes money doing that. And I am the kind of the starter / the marketing kind of guru genius behind that, if I can call myself that without sounding too arrogant. So yeah, we did that and have done that. But I've also done the same thing with a number of other different partners, because what I'm constantly, I figured out that I know process and marketing. So my quest was to find other subject matter experts where I could insert myself into the equation, add value, and build something for both of us in a manner that would pay me and my kids forever.
Incredible. I mean, for me, when I hear this, I think about leverage. Leverage is a really valuable part of building a business. A lot of voiceover people or improv people, we talked about that before, they're creatively brilliant, but when it comes to building a business, building a funnel, building a recurring business model where there's a sales engine, it's kind of out of it's difficult to comprehend because we're so focused on the right brain of things, right? Yeah. So you've added that element to things by making it a win-win, kind of sharing strategies and coming together and creating a partnership.
Yeah, and as I told you in one of our last conversations, I've really now got two pillars to my business. One is a series of partnership relationships I've developed, like the one we just described with Bill and others. But I now have, over the last year and a half, developed a program to show other people how I did what I did, and I call it's the micro equity model, and it's a kind of a 90-day program to show people how to do exactly what I do. And this is perfect for people who are coaches, consultants, and other freelancers, to help them switch, at least initially, part of their model from taking retainers or hourly fees or even rev share. Rev share is not equity. Rev share is temporary equity. What I'm talking about is building equity that if I get hit by a bus tomorrow, my kids continue to get paid. So that's what I'm teaching people now, is I'm teaching people what I did, because I don't like the idea of teaching something I haven't done myself.
That's inspiring, especially generationally, how you're talking about that, how it can impact things going forward. No, I know about joint ventures. I've done a lot of joint ventures over the years. I've managed launches. I've got joint venture revenue that comes in. from different projects I've been involved with, how does this differ from a joint venture or partnership?
Yeah, it's a good question. Joint ventures, to me, are another essential component that you should put into your mix of things that you do with people that you coach or work with. But equity goes quite a bit deeper. It goes from saying, hey, we're going to work together on a project and usually you don't have any, if you do have an agreement, it doesn't include the continuing payment to you or your heirs once you are no longer on the planet. And that's the big difference between the whole concept of equity or microequity and doing a joint venture. I think that's the biggest difference. So joint ventures could entail all kinds of things, and I don't know what that agreement looks like.
Yes.
The beauty of what I do, I suggest to people, and in all my materials, I help them put together a simple one-page agreement. And that's what's been in place for all my equity deals.
Incredible. So you're actually getting involved early on. You bring your brilliance, your genius into it.
Yes,
Whether it's
yes, but I'm going to do a faux pas it's usually yes and for improv, but yes, the but is this. It doesn't mean that I won't work with people who already have an established business. Example, I play a lot of poker for fun, and I sat down at a poker table a few months back, bumped into a guy who was in the popcorn business. He produced stuff for other brands in which he produced both the savory and the sweet kinds of popcorn that you might get, from your local 7-Eleven or local store in the corner. And I said to him, well, I know a lot about online marketing. What percentage of your business is done online? And he said, I don't know, maybe 3%. I said, well, what would happen to your business if that increased 5 or 6-fold? And he said, that would be tremendous. So we began to talk about a partnership. He happened to be a brick and mortar business, but this concept of equity and microequity can extend not just to startups, not just information businesses, but any business.
Does this also involve establishing like a secondary LLC or corporation to allow for this to happen? Is that also involved?
That's a good question, and it can be set up that way. In my case, what I have usually chosen to do to make things simple from an accounting standpoint is to create an agreement where, in the case of my first one with Bill, the voiceover guy, what I did is we haven't had an agreement that he would pay me almost as a consultant, but in perpetuity, and I had no need to set up a separate entity in order to do that. But I'm not an accountant, nor do I play one on TV. I don't attempt to give people legal advice. So the answer to your question is, it depends on your individual situation. In my case, I have never structured it so that every new entity is a new LLC, but it certainly could be done that way.
Wow, this is very inspiring. I'm a big believer of having multiple sources of income, ways of leverage, right? Adding value when possible, specifically whether things that we're each of us good at your marketing, sales, and so forth, and adding another leg. So it's great. Do you specifically choose who you work with in these cases?
Okay. It's a really, really, again, a good question, because when people come to me, oftentimes they'll find me, and I think it's kind of like, it's a serious process, because you don't want to be partnering with someone that you don't fully, you're not really sure about. And I would say there are two important things that you need to consider, which is a skills match and a personality match. And by that, I don't mean coincidence skills. I mean complementary skills. So you're looking for people. I would suggest most people should look for people with skills that are different than they have, and personalities that are different than they have.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, that's very invaluable. I'm in the world of accountability too. That's what we do in success circles. And some of the things I've learned over the years around partnership come from systems where we remind people, like on an ongoing basis, what they're aiming for, what the mission is, so they can come together, do things jointly or individually in a ways that forwards the mission, right? And success circles about being better each day. In partnerships, joint ventures that I've managed in the past, there have often been challenges when it came down to bringing people together in a partnership of sorts, where both parties would stay aligned, stay accountable to the commitment that was there. And that's part of the reason why I even left that space close to a decade ago, managing the launches because not everyone, they would come in with a good idea, right? Coming together to co-promote and so forth. How do you ensure that the parties in this situation stay accountable, stay aligned with what they're going after?
Again, I think it's a really good question, and I'd like to use a baseball analogy. In baseball, if a baseball player is hitting 300, that means he only gets on base 3 out of every 10 times, which is a phenomenal batting average. And I think it's true of the equity partnerships and micro equity partnerships I've been involved with as well, which is you can't go in with the expectation that everything is going to work. You can't bat 1,000. So you have to go in with the understanding that you're going to do your best to try and see something work, but you also have to be ready for and have in place systems that understand that divorce may occur. In fact, more likely than not, because if I'm batting 300 and I think I have a pretty good batting average, that means that 7 out of 10 deals that I do either go nowhere or they fizzle out or there ends up in some massive crazy fight that nobody likes.
Right. Yes. Yeah. And for me, it's the friction. I see business partnerships come to an end and their challenges. And I remember in following some of the work you've done recently, you talk about establishing context, setting the right contracts early on to ensure that if things go sideways, they can be amicable, right? There's less friction at the end of it. And I'm just really curious how you do that. I've been in partnerships in the past that didn't work out as well. And I walked away because for me, it was just more friction than I needed at the time because I'm focusing on other ventures, my own mission, things I'm working on. How do you encourage people to disband in those situations where the things don't align?
In my experience, and I don't know if you share the same belief, it usually comes down to one of two things. Either there's a strong personality clash, A, or B, there's a money argument or clash.
Yes.
And in order to do that, I think that it's kind of like you have to e-harmony your business, making sure in advance that you're with the right partner, and that will help on the personality side. On the money side, the way that I've done it is this, which is that if you and I were going to go into some kind of a deal, an equity partnership together, the one thing that I always do is I leave the collection and distribution of money in your hands. I never get involved with the collection of the money. The theory there being that no one can ever accuse me of financial impropriety because I'm not the one taking in the money. I'm expecting my partner, in which case this might be you, I would say, look, Joe, I'm not very good at accounting. I don't like doing the money side. And frankly, I'd rather have you collect the money and every 5th of the month send me a check based on our agreement. Yes. So if I can properly select people with personalities that are complementary to mine and also put the money in their hands, because then I can never be accused of being, of doing something on the, that's not quite kosher.
And I'm guessing it's also helpful to vet people out in advance and ensure they have the systems in place or a bookkeeper or accountant on their team who handles that. I find that some of the best visionaries, business leaders, tend to have somebody in a secondary basis, like a CFO, a bookkeeper handling a lot of that so they can focus on the big thing, right?
Yeah, in one of my partnerships, in the partnership I now have in the voiceover field, the third party, Chris, handles both the copy and the funnels. In the funnel system that we use with Go High Level, he can basically allow the machine to tell us who gets what and when. And that makes it super easy because then really no one's doing it, but the machine is handling that.
Yes, and you build the automation and the systems and it communicates and the CCs and all that good stuff. Fantastic, Fred. Well, how do people find out about you? Like, of course, I have the website, but I want to hear you say it. Like, how do people find out about you and access this and learn more about the system?
Well, the first thing that I want to impress upon everyone who sees or hears this is that I am not out trying to solicit business, because I realize that if I talk to you, there's only a 30% chance that we might do something together as partners. That's a little bit different when someone is considering my 90-day accelerator program. But the best way to contact me there is I gave it to you earlier. I do what I call, I don't really know how to phrase this, but the best way I've found to call it is a non-sales call. I don't really know. I don't want someone to even consider my 90-day accelerator program on learning how to do microequity themselves unless they talk to me and I make sure it's a good match because it's over 5,000 bucks. It varies. Its eventual price is going to be closer to 10. Right now it's in beta, so it's a little bit lower. But I don't want someone to make a large decision financially without talking to me first and making sure that we both agree it's a good idea for them to do. So they can just set up a meeting through the link that I have here through a new calendar company. I mean, I'm always amazed by this. Calendly decided to drop all of us who are Mac users. You cannot use Calendly with your Mac anymore, but a new company called Zeeg does. I don't know how they wanted to alienate, that large percentage of the population, but the new calendar system I'm using when people see the link, it's called Zeeg, Z-E-E-G. And I'd encourage people to go there, zeeg.me, and set up their own calendar because that's the way I do it, and it's free, and it's phenomenal, and it works with a Mac.
We'll make sure the link for that,
Sure.
as well as your website. Fred Gleeck Live is on this as well.
Yeah, fredgleecklive.com is the website that describes the 90-day accelerator. And if you're curious about what I do from a partnership side, I use the site joinfredgleeck.com. Again, both of which I think we'll put on the site.
Do you have case studies of the clients you've worked with in the past?
It's a good question. Those sites have just recently gone up. So I have a number of case studies. They have not yet been put on there. But what I would do is say if somebody inquired, I do have, like Bill's case study, I went in through a pretty extensive, description of what happened. I think it's about a 40-minute video. And that's something that I'm going to put up. But if it's not yet up, just ask me for it.
How does AI play into all of this? Because AI is here now and it's so all over, right? When it comes to creating content videos, one can actually, you mentioned the channel you created with this gentleman a number of years ago. In this day and age, especially voiceovers, this is not about voiceovers, but I'm just curious about how your take is. When it comes down to creating content and videos and programs and products, it's abundant, right? And there are so many different trainers out there doing a lot of that. How does AI integrate into this world that you're talking about with microequity, especially when it's so easy to create content these days?
Yeah, I mean, I think that I love using AI and AI tools. I have some colleagues in business who are completely technophobic and have no interest in getting involved or knowing about the new technology. I love all the new technology. The one thing I have found thus far is that AI, and I'm sure you've heard, Joe, one of the AI voiced YouTube videos, sometimes they're just awful.
Yeah.
So I think it's going to take a while before AI takes over. For example, my ability, one of the things I always offer my partners that I work with is, hey, I'll make all the sales calls. I'll do all the negotiating. You show me an AI right now that'll get on the phone live with a customer and sound like a real human, negotiate in real time. That's just not happening yet. If it happens at some point in the future, watch out, everybody. I was just talking about this yesterday. We're going to probably have to have that universal basic income set up because then everybody loses their job. But as of right now, I think AI is phenomenal for doing things. For example, I have a whole set of prompts that I use to set up the initial front end low ticket offers that I encourage people to do and things like that. I think it's phenomenal for those less than real personal elements that you have to have. I love AI, but I think it only can go to a certain point, at least as of now.
I agree. I think at this point, it is exceptional for help desk, answering questions, and sometimes they can get an answer quicker than somebody who has access to a FAQ. But that sales element, it's not there yet. It could happen. It could happen for you.
Yeah, I'll give you a real example. So we have in the voiceover blueprint, my daughter Kayla, who's a techie. I said to her, with all the emails you've sent back and forth manually, we could take all of those emails back and forth, put them into an AI, and have it probably do a pretty good idea of answering all the questions people had. And she hasn't yet done that, but I think with 3 or 4 months worth of emails back and forth on a daily basis, that would be a perfect case for doing that.
Amazing. I'm a big believer in systems automation when possible. And I love human contact too.
Me too.
Right? And it's absolutely necessary when it comes to engagement, selling, and a business. At least right now it is, right? We'll see where the future goes. But I think even in the future with AI here, it's going to be even more critical that we have businesses where people connect directly in person, virtually this way, because it's for just for purpose of sanity, right?
I agree 100%.
What are some rituals you take on each day to keep yourself engaged, other than maybe watching an occasional play show, which you did back in the days in New York?
Yeah.
What are some things you do on a daily
I,
basis?
I miss that terribly, and I'm very jealous that you get to do that still because I was a big proponent of going to see live theater. One of the things I try and do every day, I'm new into this concept of IWT, intermittent walking therapy, which is people for many years were obsessed about doing 10,000 steps a day. Remember those?
Yeah.
It's now morphed into something different, which claims to be literally, and the data is 10 times better for you health wise, which is to intermittently walk, meaning the goal, I haven't gotten there quite yet, is 3 minutes regular speed walking, 3 minutes really fast walking, and you do that in multiple sets, getting to at least 30 or 40 minutes a day. And you can really, so right now I'm still doing a minute regular, 3 minutes regular, 1 minute standard walk. So I do that. I try and do that every day if I can. Get into the gym, and of course do something to keep my mind off everything, which is play poker.
I was reading an article on Good News Broadcast.com. It's cited for news and my day with Good News. Specifically talking about how when one walks faster, right, our ability to run faster correlates with our ability to avoid dementia. It's one of the many things out there. So it totally aligns.
Yeah, I hope it's true.
What else do you do each day? What are other
And,
routines, rituals?
I do a lot of, one thing I do at the end of the day to wind down is on YouTube. I've found a couple of different people who do these relaxation, meditation, prepare for sleep exercises. So one of the things I do is I try and get to bed around 10 every night, but at 9, I stop doing everything that I'm doing and start that ritual of listening to meditative stuff. And that puts me in a much better mode to sleep, because I think that sleep, and Andrew Huberman, I don't know, I'm sure you know who he is.
Yes, I do.
He talks about how invaluable sleep and good sleep is. And I think that that's one of the things that helps prepare me for that. So during the day, I'm doing my intermittent walking therapy. At night, to close it down, I'm doing the other. And then also, I try and do, I guess, what was it called? Pomodoro, where you intensely do work and then stop. And I do that, but in my own version. I try not to work too long at one stretch without taking a break, getting up, moving around, because without that, I think you're dead in the water.
By the way, I love that you're sitting on a massage chair. Right?
Yeah.
And you're conducting this there. That's my first experience with someone doing that. I think it's brilliant. Right.
Well, it's funny because it replaces having grown up in the Philippines, where literally I remember as a kid, my mom and dad would have a lady come over who would give them full massages, and me at 8 years old, my little mini massage. And I remember the total bill. I asked my mom years later. She said, "Yeah, we used to give her about $2," and she was delighted. I'm like, if I can't do that and get real people giving me real massage, at least I can do the massage chair.
This might have come from you also. I get a massage every 2 weeks, and I have somebody walk my back. And for me, getting all the tension out of my system allows me to not only access my diaphragm, but also allows me to just really be fully present to people without having that. It might have come from, I mean, when I go to events, I listen. I take notes, like 10, 20, 30 pages of notes.
I bet I said it. I can't do it with a physical person, but I am doing it with the massage chair from Costco, which, if you saw it, is really worn out because I've had it over 5 years, use it every day.
Amazing. And I'm sure all the intermittent walking adds up, and it helps quite a bit to wind down.
It
It's
does.
wonderful. If you could give advice to the 18-year-old version of yourself, or let's say somebody right now turning 18, adulthood, what would you offer that person as advice?
I would have them, or my 18-year-old self, I would say number one is be patient. Most things will take longer than you think they will, number one. But number two is figure out what's really, really important to you. And I think we discussed this book before, Die with Zero.
Yes.
And that particular book that was written by a former hedge fund manager who's now a very active poker player, that book talks about the value of experiences and how when people oftentimes are thinking about their future, they're thinking about how much money they're going to make. In fact, one of the most beneficial things I would tell myself is, and I actually did a lot of this, which is a lot of times people concentrate on how can they make the most money. And the accumulation of experiences to me is critical. I used to take, Joe, I was at a school, a college that gave us breaks every quarter. Every quarter I would go on a trip somewhere, spending very little money to do it, but I would always leave and go somewhere to get a new experience. And so that, to me, those are the things I would tell my 18-year-old self or somebody who's 18.
It doesn't cost much to do it, especially there are places in the world that are quite affordable when it comes to experiences. What's an experience you're still looking to have?
That's a good question. I haven't, and I'm not pandering. I haven't been to India yet. And as being a big Indian food guy, fascinated with Indian culture, hoping that one of my two very good Indian friends, either Avish or my buddy who I've known since high school, Jagdish, will help and take me over there and show me the ropes, since I know Jagdish speaks the language, but I want to get over there, have somebody show me around.
It is a beautiful country. If you ever go to Kerala, that's where my family's from.
That's the only Catholic section of India, as I remember.
It's one of the two Christian states in India. The other one is Goa, which has a huge Portuguese influence. Kerala, I think they had a huge Jewish influence back in the early, 52 AD, right? St. Thomas came over. So there's a lot of that. So I think it's more Protestant, but there are Catholics. My mom's side of the family is Catholic.
Remember, it was Christian. I couldn't remember what it was, but I'm fascinated by going over to India. So that's the one thing I have yet to do.
Yes, it's a beautiful country, and don't drink the water. I'll say that. Unless you're used to it.
Although having grown up in the Philippines, you'd be surprised. I'm kind of immune to everything.
Do you speak Filipino language?
I speak the language fluently, Tagalog, yeah. My parents both spoke 8 languages. I can fake 4 more or less. Spanish, Tagalog, English, fairly good. I will count French and Italian as a little bit of each.
When we last connected, I was astounded that you don't have... So I have a whole Filipino team of remote workers who work with me, who I engage with, some family. Team member's been with me for 10 years now. And I'm astounded that you don't have a team there in the Philippines, because you really speak the language.
My other biggest regret was not having been the person who went over there and set up remote working, groups, which would have been a perfect match for who I was.
I went scuba diving with John Jonas, who set up Online Jobs PH.
Yeah.
Back about 13 years ago, and with his whole family was scuba diving together off a cruise, and I think he was one of the first who made that accessible with the platform he built.
I've used his platform, onlinejobs.ph.
Yes, it's a great platform. Well, my friend, this has been outstanding, the session. I want everyone who is here to explore having passive, active income streams come in. Check out what Fred's doing with equity, with micro equity. Check out fredgleecklive.com. This has been a privilege to be able to connect with you, one of my early mentors, somebody who's shifted my world quite a bit with the things I do. Access this podcast, access the mind map, the AI summary, all the components of this at rulesforsuccess.com. Check it out. Check us out there.
It's been my absolute pleasure, Joe. Great to talk with you much again.
Thank you, Fred.
That's it for today's episode of rulesforsuccess.com podcast. Join us next week for another inspiring conversation with a successful entrepreneur. Until then, remember to be bold, be courageous, and go after your dreams.